Okay, so thanks very much. Okay, so hello everybody. I think we are ready to begin our second session. Please, people, some silence. Oh, okay, that's better. So let me greet Serenella Massidda, who you can see how beautiful she is only on this screen. It's a pity she's not with us, but she is more audiovisual in this way. Okay, you can also put some, you know, background of these fantastic backgrounds we can choose now, like Florida with palms and swimming pool. Okay, no. Right, so Serenella Massidda is a senior lecturer at the Roehampton University, and she's very much interested in audiovisual translation. She teaches audiovisual translation. She has published several texts on and essays on it, and even an entire volume on fan-subbing. Yes, entitled Audiovisual Translation in the Digital Age, the Italian fan-subbing phenomenon, and she will talk about fan-subbing phenomenon also today. So we are all ready for you, Serenella. It's up to you now, and we are registering.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I want to thank very much Fede and Irene for inviting me, because it doesn't happen very often to talk about fan-subbing, you know, lately. So I'm very happy to do this once again after a while. I will share my presentation now. You should be able to see it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay, but I am not for some reason.
Well,
okay.
You're sharing your
Sorry.
desktop.
Do it again. Sorry. Okay. Yes. Oh, here it is. Okay, good.
Yes, now we can see it. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so the title of my presentation is Fan-subbing in the Digital Age, Latest Trends and Future Prospects. Let's see the content. So I will start with the context, the turn of the century, and the technological advances and some keywords related to this. And then I will pass to talk about fan-subbing in detail, some literature review about Europe and the world, and obviously I will talk about piracy, digital copyrights, legal actions in Europe, and then the case of Italy, of course. Let's start. So in the new millennium, we have witnessed a lot of transformations, technological, digital, social, cinematic, the pandemic as well, so many. And I think that two keywords really summarize what's happening. One of them is Ubicomp, and the second one is video streaming on demand, boom. Let's see the first. Ubicomp stands for ubiquitous cloud computing. It is known as pervasive computing, ambient intelligence, or everywhere, which is my favorite word. So Ubicomp is a concept derived from computer science. It means that computing is made to appear anytime and everywhere. This is in contrast with desktop computing, because Ubicomp can occur using any kind of device from any location and any format. So we interact as users with a machine, which can be a laptop, an iPad, a smartphone, or Google Glasses, you choose. But it's also the web, which is supported by this kind of technology right now. The second keyword is video streaming on demand, of course. Let's watch this very short video so that we can understand the context we are in right now.
this is meant to.
Okay, so this video streaming boom means that a shift has happened from cable TV to internet TV or video streaming on demand. This major breakthrough has modified the needs of audiences worldwide. And what's happened is that has made TV shows and films accessible either in a dubbed or a subtitled version in multiple languages. This is huge because it wasn't like that like some years ago. And we will cover this in a second. So we have a new audience, which is global right now, is not restricted by traditional linear TV. And sometimes this new audience is offered more than we actually need. We are always seeing that our needs are anticipated. This boom started with Netflix, of course, and was followed by many others, Hulu, Disney Plus, and so on. You just name one. So what's the downside? We have this shift in audiovisual content from small to immense in a few years. And we see that language service providers have to deal with this. This is very disruptive in terms of workflows for the demand of localization across the globe. So at the turn of the century, in this void produced by the SVOD boom, these LSPs were trying to explore viable options. But meanwhile, fan subbers around the globe were already forging alternative web-based localization workflows that were able to deliver hundreds of fan subs a day in an unprecedented tight turnaround time. So as for fan subbing, we have a first wave, I've called it first wave, which started in the late 80s with Japanese anime, which were banned in the US. And we know why, because they were overly violent or sexual. And normally in the Western world, cartoons were addressed to children only. So once they were gone, fan groups of otakus, which means nerds in Japanese, started subtitling these productions in the dark using VHS and just sending the VHS to fans with the fan subversion. With high-speed internet access and the widespread use of the Web 2.0, there was a proliferation of open source software, which made it possible to digitize fan subs. So these fans could produce online copies that were distributed using peer-to-peer file sharing like BitTorrent or Emule or any others available during the 90s. But with the second wave, which started in the new millennium, which is just a revival of the phenomenon mainly, the focus has shifted to a different kind of production, US TV shows. And in 2005, in the US, we see that this kind of production started flourishing. And why? Because these really encourage unprecedented viewer involvement and addiction, we can say. So here you see Lost, which was broadcast for the first time in 2004 in the US. This kind of format, I think it's part of what we call the golden age of US TV shows. The features are a cast of multiple main protagonists, as it happens in Lost, the horizontal format, which is the narrative that continues from one episode to another, the many seasons that compose the show. So all this trigger that proliferation of fan subbing machines in each specific territory due to the lack of accessibility, of course. This kind of format, this novel format, became the bread and butter of video streaming on demand with binge watching on top. What is the nature of the phenomenon mainly in the second wave? It's a social practice, fan subbing. and is performed in community-based groups located in many places in the world. Argentina, Croatia, Portugal, Spain, and you can see that we have a long list. But it can also take the form of individual practice, just like in Poland, for example, and also manifest as web aggregators or conglomerates. These are websites that distribute the soft subs, which means the subtitle file that you associate with the video, that is circulating online in different versions. Here you see the most famous websites: Addicted, Open Subtitles, and Undertexter. We will talk about this one in a moment. So here you have like a picture of the geolocalization of fansubbing, and this is based on the studies. So we don't know if there are other instances of fansubbing practices in other places in the world, but it gives us an idea of what's happening. As you can see, the Anglophone areas are not red for obvious reasons. Here is just a snapshot of the literature review in Europe, and these are just a very recent publication on fansubbing. As you can see, there is a lot of interest in the topic, but also in the world as well, in Argentina, Brazil, obviously in China, Jordan and Lebanon, Iran, Japan, and so on. When we talk about fansubbing, we have to deal with piracy as well. In the US, the International Intellectual Property Alliance presented the losses from worldwide piracy as one of the most significant challenges to the economy. After this, a series of initiatives against online piracy started as a way to reduce the criminal activity on a global scale. As far as copyright law, both the US and the UK have documents stating that authors have the exclusive right to produce derivative works based upon the copyrighted work, of course. But we also have the Berne Convention for the Protection of Literary and Artistic Works, which allows exceptions for protected works that may be used without the copyright holder's authorization and without compensation. This is a so-called gray area that was used for a while in fun practices to protect, let's say, fun practices for a while. But none of the above copyright law addresses digital copyrights and online piracy. As for digital copyrights, we have a set of agreements in place. One of the latest is the European Directive on Copyright in the Digital Single Market and belongs to 2019. And this is a tangible sign of the increasing tendency to control the web at the expense of users, rather than really addressing the problem of online copyright infringement. So as far as the first wave of fansubbing is concerned, this did not trigger any legal action on the part of copyright holding industries. The media industry, for some reason, let fans operate within a legal gray area that we have discussed. And apparently, these illegal practices at the time increased the dissemination of cultural products and increased the addiction to media products. As far as the new millennium is concerned, fan practices continued undisturbed for some years. But in 2009, Alice, representing Israeli film companies, sued QSubNet webmasters for providing fansubs. They were fined and they had to issue a public apology. From this moment on, something started to change, because in 2012, it happened in Norway to another conglomerate distributing fan subs, but the car acknowledged the non-commercial nature of the website and the difference between the act of subtitling and distributing pirated content. And this is interesting because it distinguishes between the two activities. In 2013, in Poland, same case against another website, but they could not prove criminal intent in providing subtitles for free. The case was dismissed with no charges. In 2013, same year in Sweden, and this was documented by Ian Pedersen as well, Undertexter was sued for copyright infringement. And they were fined and the website was taken down in the end. Okay, so what happens to Italy then? We had two very big communities working, Itasa and Subsfactory, and they managed to work for around 10 years until a documentary was produced, Subs Heroes, about just one of the two fan communities, and this triggered really negative reactions. I want to show you the trailer with some information on it. Let's watch it together.
Winter is coming.
I am the danger.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
We have to go back!
Sono le 5 di mattina di mercoledì 18 maggio 2016 e siamo qua a tradurre il season finale di Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Dalle 8 di mattina alle 7 di sera lavoro, poi stacco, torno a casa, lungo il tragitto alla cabina del telefono come Superman, entro, mi cambio e sono The Dude.
La prima domanda è sempre: ma ti pagano e quanto prendi? Niente. E allora perché?
Se non ci fossimo noi, tanti telefilm in Italia non sarebbero mai arrivati.
Okay, now you have an idea of the topic of this documentary. So what happened afterwards? As you can see in the news, we have titles like Italian subs is illegal. These are the Night Avengers, the superheroes of fan subs. You know, so many people started talking about this. And this was actually really bad for fan practices because the local anti-piracy outfit, FAPA, the Federation for the Protection of Audiovisual and Multimedia Content, represented cinema industry in Italy, stated that the movie paints illegal activities as the work of heroes, which is actually true, that's what they say, and accused the group of fueling piracy and glamorizing criminal activity. They declared the fan sites, or not just Italian subs, but all sites like this, a threat to the growth and cause of damage to film companies. So the secretary affirmed when a protected work is subtitled and there is no right to do so, a crime is committed. And that was the epilogue. So all the websites were shut down and we have no visible activity anymore of fan-subbing practices in Italy from this moment on. What are the future prospects? So we see that we have a global audience offered a lot of freedom and customized experience. And as a result, the very nature of fan culture has changed. It was once a necessary evil to make a product accessible in the local language. But right now, there is no reason for them to operate. The lawsuits launched by the broadcasting and AVT industry around the world really managed to slow down these practices and eventually stop their illegal activity. This perfect storm has had a very strong impact on fan communities in Europe mainly. And I think that this is the consequence of a novel simplified analysis of a system that is really unprepared to tackle the issue of digital copyright infringement at its roots. This was the halt of practices in Europe, like the swan song of the hopeful pathway created by the Web 2.0. But times are changing, and the fan culture in the digital age will have to go with the flow. Right now, the future is not bright as it seemed at the beginning of the millennium. And I believe that fan subbing practices are just the tip of the iceberg as far as online illegal activities are concerned. There's a powerful force in place, and is illicit streaming sites, which is really on the rise at the moment, because there are too many video streaming services and people are unwilling to pay for all of them, of course. And this creates a gap in the system. What we envision is that digital copyright law will find a balance in order to nurture and promote creativity and also protect the rights of authors as well. In conclusion, I think that every time a gap is created in the media and broadcasting industry, that is when an underground movement is created within the fan community, that is, out of necessity. That's what happened in 2005, and these years, 2005 and 2015, are like the boundaries of the second wave of fan subbing. 2005 being the year when the interactive connotation of the Web 2.0 really acknowledged globally for the first time that the person of the year is you, which means the user. But this freedom is not there anymore, as seized. The web is very much controlled and the experiment is over. I have to ask myself, is fan subbing dead? I think that as far as Europe is concerned, is in a coma, not dead. And we will have to wait for another rabbit hole in the matrix to see what happens next. Thank you so much. And these are the references if you're interested. Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
With fan subtitles.
Sorry, I can hear you very well.
I was asking the audience here, is there anyone who has never seen a film with fan subtitles? No, oh, yes, there is one. Yes, David, yes, because we are so, yes, against illegal practices, okay?
But because he doesn't need subtitles. That's
well, when you watch a Korean TV series, maybe you need no subtitles. Okay, so yes, we have some time for questions. I think if he wants to begin, there are many. I don't want to begin again, so yeah, I will be silent for a moment.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us now?
Not very well, sorry.
Not very well.
No.
Right, and now?
Better.
Better. Okay. So I think we need to speak to her via this mic, right?
Yes. So yeah, if someone wants to ask
yes,
something,
please.
we will repeat into the mic.
I didn't expect that fan subs were in a coma, right?
Yeah. Well,
I didn't expect that.
yeah, I will ask something.
Okay.
Well, I'm here, I have the mic, so I can rule the words. So yes, this is very interesting. And I do remember this very, very sad time when the Polish site of subtitling was taken down. Okay, so because it was not possible to indicate the criminal intent, but they simply have taken down the site, so it's very difficult to find these subtitles now. And also, of course, with streaming, it's easier to find the series with the languages you need to. But I was wondering about this thing about subtitling in coma. Isn't it that it's transformed into this other kind of activities? We can find more and more on YouTube or other platforms, like you know, a false dubbing. Okay, so all this compilation or some fragments of the films with a new soundtrack, with a new dubbing or new subtitles, which are completely invented. So maybe this is how the creativity of fans now is developing. Also because in the participatory culture, we have more and more fans who are not satisfied with how a given film or series is going. Now there are all these films, how it should have ended, what should it happen. No, so there are new versions, and with technology we can do more and more. So don't you think what happened with these fan subbers? Maybe now they are doing this creative new false dubbing.
Thank you for the question, because I can just add something more that I didn't have the time to say. I'm actually still in contact with fan subbers in Italy, because I was part of the community myself for 3 years for my PhD students. So I was a fan subber. I fan subbed so many TV series.
Illegal activities. Okay.
Yes, it was an illegal activity, but at the time it was in the gray area. So, and I was a researcher, in disguise. But if you go to a website, and you want to find the Italian subtitles of a series, you can find them. So what happens when I say in a coma, I mean that they're still there, but they're not visible because they're not allowed to have a website and to, you know, show off what they're doing. But they're still doing it in a very different way because it's hidden once again. And they're not as many as they were in the past, because we had a community of 500,000 members, which is unbelievable if you think about that. As far as the creative side of the practice, I think that if we think about Squid Games, for example, on all the, you know, outrageous comments about the translation in so many languages, I wouldn't be surprised to find somebody producing, you know, the good English subtitles for the show, and maybe we can find them online, or the Italian subtitles for the show, the good ones, already available online. This is the gap I was talking about. When something is wrong or not faithful or not done well, that's when fan communities start doing things, start, you know, working together for the greater good, let's say.
It is the trigger, no? You mean that is the trigger for them to take action.
Exactly. So I think that is going to happen again. That's my point of view.
And do you think that they were more creative than official translators?
Well, we cannot generalize, but if by creative we mean adding new trends and inspiration, yes, of course, because they were allowed more freedom. So they created their own rules. Fan-subbing rules are not the same as mainstream subtitling rules, of course. What we have seen is that sometimes these rules were really good, and they were somehow used, and they helped change things. If we think about the number of characters per line allowed before fan-subbing, I think that in Italy it was, I think the range was around 38 characters, and now with Netflix we reached 42 characters, and fan-subbers usually use 45. So is a kind of, enriching rules as well. So creativity is pretty much needed, I think, to make sure that things can improve in this field. Sure.
Subtitling has copied some of those trends as well, like the placement of subtitles and so on, right?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yes, the mainstream subtitling has copied some of those new trends that they invented years ago, like the placement of subtitles or colors or.
Yes, absolutely. There are so many instances that are now acquired and they've become mainstream. But if we also think about norms about swear words, think about Netflix guidelines, for example, on censorship. I think that it was the very first time that we saw like a big multinational company saying to subtitlers, you have to tell the truth. You cannot neutralize vulgarity or swear words. You need to be faithful to the source text. And I think that fansubbing really played a major role in this. So it's very much welcome when this happens.
Yeah, I think the fan subtitles were the first to translate fuck, scazzo, and non dindirindina, for example, no, or something like this. So yes, they opened this major trend. So any questions in the meantime? Someone gather up courage to ask? Yes, David. I will repeat maybe, yes.
Was there also an argument within the community? I think there was, those who wanted to add more pictures, more creative aspects, and those who didn't. And then at the same time, although all the fans, subbers use pop-ups, that's not come into at all the profession. So some things have been taken up, but not use of pop-ups.
You repeat because I
David Catan.
Thank you.
Is asking a question. He says that some things have been taken by official or mainstream subtitling, but some other things haven't, like the use of pop-ups by fansubbers. So maybe things such as changing the images, and I think that you want to go into that direction, haven't been taken by mainstream subtitling. What do you think, Sarah?
The fact that not many of these features were taken. I think that, that the main thing is that we take what we can and we need to strike a balance. Not everything is allowed. Also in terms of cognitive load, I think, for the audience. In mainstream subtitling, we produce subtitles as a guidance to watch something, to make something pleasant and entertaining. If we add too much context, text and comments and all the rest, it's probably not really as pleasant and easy for like a global audience to follow, as opposed to the niche audience of fansubbers who are people used to very high reading speed or wanting more and more about the original. This cannot be perceived in the same way by everyone. So you need to strike a balance and find a way to make people happy, global audiences happy. Yeah.
We do agree. We both agree here. Okay. So yes, I think the time is up. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.
And stay with us. Stay with us, Ernella.
I will. Thank you so much.
Yes, and now we move on to our second speaker, who is with us.
Let's clap. Let's clap.
Please tell Spiteri journey that you can model yourself. Okay, maybe here because that's where we can turn on the light if you don't need. Okay, no one will fall asleep. No. Okay, so now we have our second speaker who is with us. Actually, is just as beautiful and then as the previous speaker. So this is a nice thing. And yes, the Giselle is. Okay. Just one moment for technical things, right? Okay, because we need to, yes, right? Okay, let's see if you can put things in. Okay, so when we are yes, initiating the presentation, I will briefly present Giselle, who is an audiovisual translator and a dubbing writer. Since, well, she is so young, I won't say since when, because better not. So she has an extensive experience, a practical experience now in translation. And she's also teaching translation. She is a tenured lecturer and the Department of Translation, Terminology and Interpreting Studies and the University of Malta, where actually she created, yes, this new branch of translation studies. She introduced the audiovisual translation into the curricula, into the teaching of the university. And you have, yes, and she brought her students, so this is absolutely the best thing, yes, she could do. So up to you, Giselle, and she will be talking to us, as you can see, about extending the creative intent, pushing the boundaries in dubbing scripts. So
thank you for the introduction. And thank you, Irene and Feda, for having me here. Okay, so actually I was intrigued by one of the questions, initial questions. Do we actually need a 10 creative ABT? And so I would like to start with a bit of a reflection on the term creative dubbing, because obviously I'll be focusing on dubbing. Creative dubbing because we're trying to explore, no? We're talking about artistic contribution, authorial intent, unconventional practices. So I'd like to kind of, on the one hand, challenge the term and then embrace it at the same time. And yes, because the first thing I wanted to do was to see how the industry actually interprets and uses the term creative dubbing. And what I came across when I Googled creative dubbing was practically a series of job vacancies. So Netflix, Amazon Prime seeking to recruit creative dubbing supervisors, creative dubbing managers, creative dubbing directors. And if you go through the job descriptions, what you will find is that the role is meant to preserve the creativity of the original creative intent of our filmmakers.
Yeah, that's a beautiful phrase, creative of creativity.
Yes, it's their wording. So it's a job description for creative dubbing supervisors or managers to develop creative approaches to the challenges at hand. And likewise, the role will be aligned by content origin and will creatively oversee all languages produced on a title. So this is very interesting, no? Because we're trying to explore something more, we're trying to explore something beyond. And yet, it seems that the way the industry uses the term, well, it seems to suggest a process that ensures that the target product is actually in line with the original intent, with the intention of the original screenwriters. So I thought of taking this definition as a point of reference, which is what we are trying to explore here, you know, creativity as an act, idea, or product that changes an existing domain. I find this very interesting. Mihaly, I'm not able to pronounce the surname. I will pretend I'm on a first name basis with world-renowned psychologist Mihaly, who dedicated a whole book on creativity, which is very interesting. So we can see that we have perhaps two intentions. On the one hand, the intention of creating something other, this authorial intent, this special agenda we are exploring here. And on the other hand, we have the intention of reproducing the same intention, the same effect. So perhaps we need to make a little bit of a distinction here. Maybe we can make a distinction between creativity as an end in itself, for the sake of creativity, for the sake of this authorial intent, versus creativity as a means at the service of the original product, this faithfulness now that we were talking about. And in my opinion, it's not a matter of comparing the degrees of creativity, because even creativity as at the service of the original product can require the same degree of creativity, or if not more, for the sake of reproducing the same intention. So I wouldn't necessarily associate faithfulness with not being creative, or the contrary. Those of you who have had maybe experience in professional practice, you will know that with all the constraints we are trying to overcome, we actually need to be very creative. So, translators as authors. In fact, translators for dubbing, following mainstream conventional practices, are already considered translators, already considered authors, and recognized by the government as authors, at least in Italy. So in Italy, translators for dubbing, also known as dialogisti now, so dialogue writers, not simply with inverted commas, translators. Dialogue writers are registered at the CI, Società Italiana Autori ed Editori. So they are registered as autori per il cinema authors. I'm talking about dubbing script writers. And our works, sorry, now I switch from our to they, because I'd like to share as much as possible the practitioner perspective. Our works are registered at the CI, at the Sezione Cinema, just like original screenplays of film screenwriters on the same level. And we receive royalties every time the work is broadcast, or television or DVD is sold. And the government recognizes translators as authors to the point that we are VAT exempt. We don't pay VAT. It's considered opera dell'ingegno, intellectual property. So I find this very interesting. So please bear with me, allow me to go further, because maybe we need to make a distinction between terms, or maybe we need to associate slightly different meanings. Because to me, to be honest, creative dubbing is not necessarily the same thing as creativity in dubbing. Likewise, creativity in ABT. So perhaps we can use creative dubbing to describe a type of practice, maybe associating it with this, new, imaginative, going beyond authorial intent, while creativity in dubbing can possibly focus on the cognitive processes, on the cognitive creative processes that are intrinsic to the professional practice, because the constraints of the practice of the professional practice, dubbing, and even other types of the modes of AVT, trigger these creative processes. And then perhaps co-creation in dubbing, referring to co-authoring work with the original with the screenwriters. So maybe creative dubbing could fall under the category of creativity as an end, but we need to bear in mind that the industry uses the terms creative dubbing and creative AVT in a different way. We need to be careful, because otherwise we'll keep on widening this terminological gap between the industry and academia. But anyway, let me just place this there. And therefore, creativity in dubbing and co-creation in dubbing can possibly fall under the category of creativity as a means. This is totally just my thought process, my opinion, that I thought of sharing with you today. So I'd like to share an example that could possibly be described as co-creation in dubbing, and I'm taking this from my own professional practice. It's a French language program. Don't be fooled by the images, because it looks like a cute, innocent program for children or kids. In actual fact, the French writers intended this for a family audience and an adult audience. Well, I think the French have a different idea of what a program for families are. Now I'll explain why. Because the themes are adult themes. This program talks about, relationships, marriage, having babies, sex. It's full of double entendre, full of sexual innuendos, So I'm like, okay, interesting, because I purchased this for Italian children, like roughly for the ages of 6 to 9, 7 to 9, something like that. And they broadcast it out. See, people nodding, okay. So some of you are actually, oh, why were you watching this? This was on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m. I myself did not watch it, okay. Okay, fine, that's good, that's good. So you're familiar with this. The program was called E Domenica Papà, Dad, it's Sunday, okay. So basically, Rai told us to rewrite the script to suit it for an audience that, you know, for Italians and for Italian children. I'm just going to share with you a brief teaser, just to give you an idea of the vibe. Those of you, at least, who usually sleep on a Sunday morning and who end up watching this program. Here we go. Okay, so this gives you the idea, the gist. And so what we did was we translated the first pilot episode, and then Ryan gave us feedback, and then told us, okay, you have to rewrite the whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, perhaps you could have watched it before you actually purchased it. But anyway, it was interesting. It was interesting. So basically, then they gave us suggestions as well. And when there were the terms baby, man, woman, lovers, partners, because even though we have animals on the farm, in the original production, they would use like references to humans. So we were told to replace all those terms, to tone down everything, to replace with animals, so baby would become chick and so on, lovers would become couple, toned down, partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, young men, sheep, and so on and so forth. I've got another interesting example, very brief, just okay, so I chose this just as a very short sample, just to give you an idea of the type of rewriting we have to do across the whole serial production. So this is one dialogue line where, okay, so we see adult things. Albumi wants a baby. Alan is trying to win back his wife, his hen, I should say. And well, and the dialogue line says, Albumi would not be easily impressed by Alan's engine, by his machine, no matter how inflated, how blown up it would be. So you can easily guess that we could not reproduce this in the Italian version. So it became Albumi would be easily impressed by this giant balloon, because we're seeing the visuals, and the visuals could not be manipulated in this production, no matter how high this balloon could fly. And likewise, whenever we have references to kind of, for instance, kissing, so on some Russell becomes baciucchiamoci, smothering, so a more playful way, childish way of saying this. Everything had to become, we had to play with playfulness, allow me the pun on words. Even then we had references and actually explicit visual scenes, but anyway, special effects. Whenever we had references to sexual positions and back and front and behind the whatnot, well, I had to think of, I don't know, I would say speak of somersaults and jumping up and down and trampolines and so on and so forth. So yeah, last example from this serial production, si tu hai le fantasie, if you have any fantasies, you can tell me. We are married, and see the principle and the chain in the visuals. So then that would become something like it became. If you want to play the prisoner game, you just need to ask with the reference to marriage being eliminated. So this is just to give you an idea of the extent of rewriting, perhaps, I don't know, almost co-creating with the original authors in that case. So anyway, I kept on thinking because I'm basically walking you through my mental process while preparing this presentation. So I was thinking, okay, so what are the boundaries that tie translators? What is it, when we stick to boundaries, what do we mean? So, and when we talk about pushing boundaries, what would that imply? And to what extent can we push these boundaries? So the first thing I thought of is, let's stick to the boundaries and let me see from a professional practice perspective what this means. So I was thinking of the client and viewer, let's call it creativity acceptance threshold. Like, what are they ready to accept and expect and accept in terms of creative solutions? In a way, the question that Lukasz asked, like what liberties can translators take? So I'm going to share with you what liberties so far I have been allowed to take while translating. And basically, I came up with this list. So whenever I had these instances, circumstances, issues, the client seemed to close an eye, like they weren't really, annoyed by these liberties being taken, if I have to prioritize lip sync or culture-specific references when comprehension is at stake. That's always, number one, comprehension. Or else think of the fact that we are free to add dialogue bites when these are not present in the original. So we actually, record extra audio, sometimes to explain things mostly, to add some details. But most importantly of all, and it's interesting, is that liberties go unnoticed mostly when the dubbing directors are not proficient in, I don't know how whispering it as though they're out there listening, and I'm tempted. Anyway, so liberties go unnoticed when dubbing directors are not proficient in the source language. So there you notice that you can deviate from the original if we are taking creativity as deviating from the original. We can deviate and they wouldn't even notice in the recording studios. So this is a kind of acceptance. It's not a conscious acceptance, okay? It's simply lack of knowledge of the language. So what about challenging the boundaries then, pushing the boundaries? What would this imply? How can I, as a translator, if I want, push the boundaries, since I'm already being quite creative now in the previous list I showed you? That is within the boundaries still. That is within the acceptance threshold. So I thought, okay, but wait, hold on, I have another question. I said, what if I push the boundaries, not for creativity as an end, not to seek this authorial intent to make a statement? What if I push the boundaries because I want to change something in the dubbing practice, in the translation practice? It's just a what if. So what if I want to push the boundaries to change maybe certain routines? And I will tell you what I mean. So when throughout my practice, I noticed that whenever I tried to foreignize rather than domesticate, in instances where usually translators would domesticate, the dubbing director will give me a call and say, listen, we're going to change this and that dialogue line, okay? Please try to stick to domestication. They obviously didn't use the word domestication, but you know what I mean. So, yeah, whenever I tried, perhaps you want to retain some source culture reference or maybe some source language borrowings, that was immediately flagged. But even more interesting, what I found was, especially at the beginning of my dialogue writing career, because then I gave up, because they would flag it every time. And this is why I know, because they would call me and they would tell me. Whenever I tried to filter out some Dabiz elements, you mentioned Dabiz earlier, okay? Whenever I tried to filter out Dabiz elements, because sometimes they are used not for the sake of lip synchrony, not because we have some constraint, but simply because it is the stock solution that has been used for the past 20, 25, 30 years. So totally unnecessary. And yet, the dubbing dialogue writers would tell me, Giselle, please, let's not exaggerate here. Whenever I tried, perhaps simply to replace a noun with another noun that sounded more natural in Italian, a noun that we would use. Maybe, I use casa instead of appartamento because that is what we would use in everyday spoken language. I'm not talking about over domesticating or making the text sound too Italian, because that wouldn't be the case. I'm talking simply about certain replacements on a lexical level, or just making certain things on a syntactical level sound slightly more natural in Italian. Giselle, this is not done. Please stick to the language the viewers are familiar with. So I thought, yes, the viewers, but also what you are familiar with. And then that's it, I gave up. So I tried to seek a balance and I had to stick to what was usually done, what is usually heard. So you're giving me the opportunity to speak about pushing boundaries. If we want to push boundaries, these two can possibly be a way to push boundaries if we think that we need to change certain translation routines in our conventional dubbing practice. So if on the one hand, we have really consolidated norms in Italian dubbing, in traditional dubbing countries, and pushing boundaries would mean breaking those norms. On the other hand, in English language dubbing, a newly emerging sub-industry, I think it is still early to talk about consolidated norms. This is my opinion. I think we can talk about patterns, potential norms. Maybe it's a bit too early to talk about consolidated norms and also the B's norms. So in this case, pushing boundaries would imply breaking the norms that govern other dubbing cultures, other dubbing languages. So I recently analyzed a few English dub streams on Netflix and then tried to identify a few patterns. A few patterns I managed to identify that seem to break the norms of traditional dubbing countries, that seem to go beyond. They're doing something different, unintentionally, most likely. So one of the patterns that I identified in English language dubbing is priority given to natural sounding language at the cost of lip sync. And this is peculiar because usually the opposite would happen. Okay, priority given to lip sync at the cost of natural sounding language. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't encounter source calc and B's in English dubbing. I did, but somehow I perceived this additional effort to seek naturalness in English that I don't usually perceive in other dubbing languages, and I myself, as a practitioner, do not apply because I'm not usually allowed to. So that is one pattern. Now, to the point that we don't have a standardized language in English dubbing. In Italy, we have one standardized language without any differentiation, without any distinctions. In English dubbing, okay, we have the American versions, the British versions, but American versions consist of, they include Americanisms and colloquialisms, something that would be unheard of in, talking about Italian dubbing and standard Italian dubbing practices. So another pattern has to do with speech delivery rates. Now, just a little premise, if we had to compare English to other European languages, in particular Italian, French, and Spanish, we would find that English is a slower language, okay? The delivery speech rate of English is slower, and we need to think that there are many products translating that are being dubbed into English from Spanish, from French, from Italian. So basically, something I encountered, another pattern I encountered is priority given to natural speech tempo in the target language, in English. So once again, at the cost of lip sync. Now, the reasons for this are that Otherwise, it would be too fast, too challenging, and unnatural for the actors while recording. And then consequently, it would be too unnatural for the audience. What is it? I mean, if we have to follow the rhythm, the tempo, the speed of the source language, of the original language. Now, how do I know these reasons? Why do I know this? I happen to be collaborating with a localization company, and they actually provided this as one of their guidelines to their translators for dubbing in English. They told the translators, please do not follow the speech tempo of the original stream of the original language, because it will be too fast, too unnatural. Please write a script, okay, whereby we can have a natural sounding speech tempo in English. Now, obviously, since I was collaborating with them, it's the first thing I told them is maybe we might need to rewrite this guideline. And in fact, it was rewritten because following the speech tempo of the original language is the foundations to be able to achieve accurate lip synchronization. If you follow, in this case, the speech tempo of English, okay, you would just end up with several mouth flats, we refer to them as mouth flats, all throughout the dialogue. But even though, okay, this was with one specific company, I encountered this pattern with several other examples, several other productions. So, last but not least, another very interesting pattern, at least interesting from my point of view, is that in a number of English dub streams, I noticed that they tend to include this additional flavor, this different flavor. Now I'm talking about accents, okay? So it's not really related to translation and the dubbing scripts, but it's more about voice selection, dubbing actors selection. And basically, in some productions, I noticed that they would actually fly certain actors to Los Angeles, say from Germany, for instance, in order to have the original actors dub themselves in English. So this means that we end up with a mixed cast. Some of the dubbing actors are American, and so we hear the American accent, and then some of the actors are the original actors, so perhaps we end up with, for instance, a German-English mixed accent. But even when we don't have original actors dubbing themselves, we do have a few productions done in English where it seems that the dubbing directors intentionally ask the actors to include this flavor. And therefore, once again, mixed accents across the cast, because not all actors would apply this foreign flavor. And in a way, I don't know if you agree, it creates an otherness, a distinction between characters that we don't have in the original version. No, we have something totally different. But I'll give you a few examples. This is drawn from Fauda on Netflix. In this case, they did not use the original actors, but they engaged a few Israeli actors based in Los Angeles, because this production, this TV series, is based in Israel. So we're going to have a mixture of Americanized accents, American accents, and Israeli English accents. Okay, next example is drawn from The Rain, Danish production. So in this case, they both have the same, Danish English accents. But then when they interact with other characters, we're going to have a mixture of flavors. This is the last example, perhaps the most interesting in my opinion, drawn from How to Sell Drugs Online. this is an interesting example because this is the British version, and they use British accents across all the actors. But there was previously an American version, so basically this was redubbed into British. The first version of the first series, at least, was dubbed in American English, and they used some of the main actors and they made them redub themselves in English. So they flew to Los Angeles and some of the main characters redubbed themselves in English. So in the specific scene, for instance, unfortunately, I can't retrieve the American version anymore because it was replaced by the British version that adopted a different strategy. In the American version, in this scene, we have the blonde guy who we're hearing an American accent when he speaks, and then we switch to the main character and we hear a German English accent. So as though, you know, there's this distinction between characters that seems to be highlighted for a specific reason. But in actual fact, this seems to be an unintentional effect, as in the intention behind the strategy in the case of using original actors to dub themselves is body voice adherence, no? Or else when dubbing directors ask actors to actually include a foreign flavor, it is for authenticity's sake. But the unintentional effect is this of otherness, this distinction between characters, which, in my opinion, is actually changing the original intent, or at least extending the original creative intent, unintentionally. So I will just conclude with a question. Could this unintentional digression from dubbing routines, since it changes the original intent, be considered a form or an example of creative dubbing? And that's it from my end. Thank you for listening.
Inspiring talk. I think there are several points for discussion, for reflection. To begin with, the concept of creativity, you know, and this unintentionally funny job description. I am sure they weren't intended as funny, but they are really very funny. Yes, I don't want to begin with questions. Please, question from the audience. Reflections, suggestions? Yes, David. Yeah.
First one, it's full of very, very fascinating stuff. First thing though is just to clarify, when you're saying that the creative dubbing supervisors or they're the supervisors.
No. Sorry, maybe I didn't make myself clear. So that was the job vacancies at the beginning to see how the industry uses the term creative dubbing, and they associated with supervisors, managers, directors, but not with the translators. That was something else. So that I was talking about the Italian government, for instance, that acknowledges and recognizes translators for dubbing as authors. I don't know if I have made the clarification that way.
So have a translator and then...
Yes, definitely. It's a typical role that streaming platforms such as Netflix and Amazon, they like to have this, but even Disney, because I've worked with creative dubbing directors, no? Especially Disney would have a representative, someone representing Disney in every territory. So there would be the creative dubbing director in Italy, and he would kind of supervise the dubbing scripts and what is going on, and he would supervise the creative solutions and what we're doing. But in actual fact, what they want is to make sure that we are actually
not creative,
that we are not creative, we are associating creativity with non-faithfulness. Because for me, it's not necessarily the case, because for me, the more I had to stick to the original, the more I had to be faithful, because I knew that the client or the supervisor was there checking. For me, it was like the more it's challenging on a creative level, but now we're talking about cognitive processes. So that's it, David. So basically someone supervising you know, to making sure that you are actually respecting the original intent of the screenwriters. I don't know if that answers. The supervisor supervises, but also they give their input very often, especially when it comes to titles, for instance. And they are the ones liaising with the original, you know, screenwriters when this is the case, because we don't have supervisors in all productions. So when working for most television productions, there was never a supervisor. So I didn't have anyone kind of, you know, checking what I was doing or not doing. But then when it was Disney, for instance, or when Netflix is involved, you know, there is this professional role that exists, but that doesn't necessarily exist when working with Warner Brothers, for instance. With Warner Brothers, nobody's going to notice if you change the script, except for certain productions like Big Bang Theory, for instance. You know, when something is really followed and has a lot of fans, and there's a fan forum, and the fans are there checking and comparing. Yeah, that was an issue, because the fans actually complained about lack of faithfulness to the original. Does that address your question? We have a long lunch. When you will be okay, when your intervention. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's a topic we can go on and go on. Yes. During lunch. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah, be quiet. We are now going to lunch.
Everyone's hungry now.
Margarita. Yes.
Yeah, very interesting, and yeah. Yeah, you know what, Margarita, the thing is that, is creativity measurable? So we say, to what extent, but how are we going to measure that? So yeah, always trying to respect the original intent. Then you have to decide what you're going to be faithful to. Am I going to be faithful to the intention, to the functional aspect of the dialogue line, rather? No, we know all this anyway, rather than, if I may add, because Pablo mentioned something very interesting earlier, and he talked about the fact of, you know, this universal approach, eliminating the individuality in a way, not only of the users, but also of professionals. And that's something like I found very interesting, Pablo, because throughout when working, you know, in Italy with dubbing companies, I found it very interesting that if I don't sign my work and send it, okay, and the dubbing director opens the script, they know it's mine. They know it's mine. So somehow, some way, okay, in some way, even if I follow the guidelines, even if I try to respect the original intent, even if I try, somehow they know whose script is whose. So there must be some individual, you know, creative style or input, to the point that if I don't write my name, they know it's Giselle, or they know, maybe it's more of a matter of style as well, but they kind of get used to it as well, to what extent you kind of, you know, recreate stuff, rethink dialogue lines. Exactly. Yes, the fingerprint is there is some visibility somewhere in it. The French example. Just only on the pilot episode, and in that case there was no actual supervisor. That was directly RAI, like the language editing department of RAI. Yes. In fact, I usually share that as a form of, and as an example of censorship. But it is perhaps one of the most creative, since we're talking about creativity, one of the most you know, examples where I really had to rack my brains in terms of creativity, because there was this censorship imposed. So, you know, that's my whole point, that not necessarily associating creativity with freedom, you know, because the freer you are, so the more creative you can be. Like, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. Thank you, Margarita.
Okay, yes, there's another question.
Use many words and then
Yes.
You cannot even mention that, like if that it doesn't exist in kids' word. So when you have like morire, you have to find other ways, other words that.
Yes, this was not only with Disney, but even Rai. So we have a list when it comes to children, like for instance, references to death and the words, you know, related to death. Those need to be replaced. But I even go a step further because you mentioned Disney and children, because Disney is actually Disney ABC and produces adult programs as well. So with regards to censorship, I had a blacklist that I would comply with even for adults. So there I was restricted. And so not only you have to be creative, they also give you a kind of, you know, list of words that you can't use, even sometimes for legal and commercial reasons. So this doesn't only happen with children, but even with adult programs. So that for me requires even more creativity. It's easier for me. If you give me a blank page now, you know, after having worked with these constraints for so many years, you give me a blank page. Well, if you give me a blank page, I'll probably go blank. I'll probably be stuck because now I've learned to have this creativity triggers thanks to the constraints, if you know what I mean. So if you give me a blank page and you give me like infinite solutions, mathematicians in fact say that, you know, when there are unlimited solutions, an unlimited creation process is a difficult creation process. It actually creates more limitations. When you have constraints and you're narrowing down the possibilities there on a cognitive level, okay, creativity expands. But this is cognitive science and informatics science. So
you have to comfort yourself because you are restrained.
Yeah. The adaptation from the third season onwards, because for the reasons I mentioned, they changed all the dialogue writers and some of the acting cast as well, because the fans complained.
But the problem there was not that the adaptation was not faithful original. The problem is that the adaptation was adding layers of meaning in the case that were also offensive, like the use of the word badante, which as had at the time, and also now, maybe now a bit less, a negative meaning, which was not present in the original. So in that case, the problem was that it was completely changed to adapt to an Italian audience, but in like it was changing the original.
Yes. But I added this as an example. So saying like it was not faithful was just a quick way of summarizing everything, because otherwise we would have to expand. But if just a little note, when you start working on a series, say from the third season, okay, you don't have time and you don't really know what went on before. So the client tells you, look, it did not work before. Roughly, oh, faithfulness, this, that, the fans complain, boom, start tomorrow. Please send me your script yesterday, as a typical joke, you know. Per quando lo vuoi, quando ieri, like just like stops giving this answer. So just to let you know that we wouldn't even know what happened before. And
in that case, it was changes were making the product worse. In terms of adding layers of negative meanings that were not there. It's not like they were not being faithful or changing creatively. It was creative in a negative way. So that was the problem.
Okay, thank you for that.
Time is up, but there is one last question if you want. Okay, if not, thank you again, Giselle. And now we have a lunch break, and we'll meet again at 3 o'clock. Yes, in the afternoon. Yes. So thank you for now.
Thank
and
you,
let's
thank you,
go.
Monica. Monica, I'm not sure how to remove.
Va bene, adesso vediamo.
Ok.
Va bene.
No, questo mi serviva per stare in piedi.
Ah, sì, beh, certo. Io ce l'ho anch'io, anche se di solito sono troppo pigra per stare in piedi. Aspetta, qui possiamo, penso, rompere la connessione. Sì, arrivederci a tutti online, per il momento usciamo. Ciao Enza.